Today we'll be talking about the attack simulation training platform from Microsoft. But first, let's do an introduction. So my name is Nick Oosterwijk. I'm from the Dutch office of CWSI. I'm a security and compliance consultant and certified ethical hacker. So I try to focus on security in a very broad sense, from testing security to implementing security and to make sure organizations are compliant to regulations. I have 7 years of experience within the industry, and with me is Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Well, I'm based in the Netherlands office as well. Within CWSI, I'm an endpoint and compliance consultant, which means in my day-to-day job, I'm focusing on components like Microsoft Intune, Microsoft Purview, and Defender, for example. Officially, I have a legal background, so I made a switch to IT a few years ago, and I'm for 8 years in this industry already. And happy to join this webinar and present you some details around attack simulation training. Before we start with the content of our webinar today, I want to provide a short agenda. So first we have an introduction. We already introduced ourselves, so we will skip to the overview of the current threat landscape within the existing real world, let's say. As with many Microsoft components, licensing roles and permissions is quite important, so we will highlight this during the webinar as well, talk about some features within attack simulation training, and very interesting part is the end user experience. So during the webinar, we will show you how the end user experience during an attack simulation training campaign, how it looks like. Another one is about automation. So Nick will tell something about automation within attack simulation training, so you can automate things to reduce administrative tasks. We will do a short comparison to other similar products, and we will close this webinar with some tips and tricks. Before diving into some details around attack simulation training, I just want to mention that this session will be recorded, and recording and slides will be shared afterwards. Since it's only a 45 minutes webinar, we won't provide a break in between. And if you have any questions, you can drop them within the GoToWebinar chat, and we will answer those questions afterwards. During the webinar, we have some polls since we are interested in some questions and insights. So please answer the polls we will launch during the webinar. And before we start with the attack simulation training content, I want to tell something about the CWSI group. So as we mentioned, Nick and I are from CWSI. And for those of you who are not familiar with CWSI yet, we expanded over 5 countries already. So we have offices in Ireland, United Kingdom, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. And as a company, we're focusing on Microsoft components in particular, like Purview and Microsoft security components. But on the other hand, we have some developers as well for developing iOS and Android applications, but also an important proposition like the workplace proposition we have. And if you're interested in other components than attack simulation training, please feel free to reach out to us. But as a short explanation, this is who we are.
Yeah, this is an overview of, to give you an idea of the kind of relationship that we have with Microsoft, and that we specialize in Microsoft security solutions. So we are partnering with Microsoft in different areas, but I think I want to highlight a few. In the middle at the top, you can see that we're part of the Microsoft, the bottom right, you can see that we are part of the Microsoft Intelligence Security Association, which is invite only, and we specialize in areas of security and modern work. And we've also been Partner of the Year in Microsoft Ireland in 2022 and 2020. So like Tim said, we first want to start with an overview of the threat landscape to give you an idea about what threats there are and why attack simulation training or security awareness training in general is very important nowadays. So just to get one view, one grasp from the Microsoft's digital defense report about phishing, you can see here that 25% of phishing attempts is successful, which is a huge amount if you look at the total amount of attempts of phishing attempts that are done every day. And 42% of identity attacks even is successful. So phishing is very important. Is a very important way for hackers to get access to data and to organizational assets. So Microsoft's approach to secure business is actually comprised of many different solution areas. So
it's pillared, right?
Yeah. So you have a lot of different pillars: identity and access management, of course, threat protection, cloud security, all the way to things like information governance and insider risk management. But it's not something that's that's just implemented and stands still. It's a process. So if you want to get to a secure posture, there is a process you go through to make sure that your posture gets better and better. So you start out with prevention and then detection. You do investigating and hunting. You work on response and remediation, but also on awareness and training.
Yeah, which means not only the technical components are relevant, but training is very relevant as well.
And I think that if you look at a very relevant risk nowadays, that's of course AI and phishing, because of the emergence of generative AI. AI-driven attacks are increasing significantly. And there are lots of problems with that. For example, accountability becomes challenging because it's harder to pinpoint who is responsible for a phishing attack. And that gets even worse when you look at automation, like automated phishing and social engineering attacks. That can be done nowadays with AI to create realistic voice and speech synthesis, automate phishing campaigns, generate fake videos, manipulate social media platforms. So I think that awareness training for employees is very important, especially since phishing attacks get more sophisticated with the use of AI. So today we will talk about the attack simulation training platform from Microsoft. And that is a part of one of the many different security solutions that Microsoft provides. And here we have an overview of the different solution areas that Microsoft has. And attack simulation training is part of Microsoft Defender, more precisely Microsoft Defender for Office 365 P2. So what we are wondering, the first question to you is, attendees, we want to know, are you already using phishing simulation tools within your organization right now?
So please allow a few moments for this poll and we will proceed afterwards. Okay, I think everybody was able to answer the poll. Very curious to the results of the poll. We noticed many attendees are using attack simulation training tools within their organization already, which makes it interesting to focus even more precisely on attack simulation training from Microsoft and see whether there's added value there.
Yeah, so that means that we can highlight today what makes this solution different to other solutions. So we'll be glad to talk about that later on. Thank you.
So before showing some experiences around end user experience, how it looks like for the end user, just want to highlight some things around licensing and roles and permissions, because they are important to administer the tool itself within the Microsoft security stack, but also the possibility to start using this attack simulation training tool based on licensing. Before talking about licensing and roles permissions, just one short but, because attack simulation training is compatible while using Exchange on-premises server. Although we see many customers already moving to Exchange Online, you are able to use this tool while using an on-premises Exchange server. The only detail over here is statistics and reporting functionality are limited. And it means you can still use this tool, but you need to be aware of the lack of statistics and reporting, which is quite important because in the end, you want to know how your colleagues or your employees are performing on this attack simulation training campaign, whether they succeeded or failed for this attack simulation training. So please be aware you are able to use it while using Exchange on-premises server, but there are some limitations around statistics and reporting, so please be aware. Next, I want to highlight something about licensing, because licensing is quite important when using Microsoft services in general. And as you can see on the slide right now, the attack simulation training tool is included for several licenses within Microsoft already, especially if you look to the E5 or F5 licenses, whether it is Microsoft 365 or Office 365. If you have an E5 license in general, you are licensed, or you have an E5 license. Attack simulation training is part of the Microsoft Defender for Office 365 Plan 2. Defender for Office 365 Plan 2 exists more than only attack simulation training, but attack simulation training is included within this particular component. And this is an interesting one, because if you're already using Microsoft Defender for Office 365 Plan 2 because you are using E5 licenses, for example, and you are using another tool for attack simulations than the Microsoft attack simulation training, it's interesting to see whether attack simulation training for Microsoft can provide you the same solution as your third-party solution you're using right now, for example. If you do not own the Microsoft E5 licenses yet, there are still some possibilities to start using attack simulation training, because it is possible to add this Microsoft Defender for Office 365 Plan 2 to other licenses as well. For example, the Microsoft 365 E3 license. It's a possibility to add this Microsoft Defender for Office 365 Plan 2 to this particular license, which means you are not required to make a whole upgrade from Microsoft 365 E3 to Microsoft 365 E5. But you can only add this Microsoft Defender for Office 365 Plan 2 without a whole license upgrade.
Yeah, so it's a standalone license, right?
Yes, indeed.
Right.
Yes, that's correct. The other thing I want to mention here is when using a Microsoft 365 E3 license, you are able to start a trial license for 90 days. So without having the E5 license yet, you are still able to see some features of this attack simulation training during 90 days. The only thing you need to be aware of, the trial license for attack simulation training provides limited functionality. So you're only able to use one particular component of attack simulation training, which is called a certain technique. And we will talk about those techniques within a few moments.
So not all attack techniques will be available in the trial, but you can try it out with one technique.
Yeah, exactly. Which gives you the opportunity to have a look in this this solution without doing a full license upgrade or purchasing a particular license. Next, I want to discuss something around administrative roles, because during administration of attack simulation training, you need certain roles. And as with many solutions within Microsoft 365, the global administrator role will be sufficient to administer the attack simulation training tool. But there are some roles specific dedicated to attack simulation training. For example, the attack simulation administrator, but also the attack payload author. And especially the attack simulation training administrator is interesting because you can work from a perspective of least privileges. It's even possible to assign an external party with this attack simulation administrator role, so they can carry out an attack simulation training campaign for the whole organization. Last but not least, security administrator is sufficient as well. And those permissions can be assigned within Microsoft Entra ID. Previously, there was some requirement to assign particular roles within the Microsoft Defender 365 portal, but those roles are available within Entra ID. So over there, you can assign those roles to your administrators. Next, we want to launch another poll, and we are curious whether you are already using licenses which include the attack simulation training tool. So as we discussed previously, we are talking about E5 licenses or F5 licenses. So we will allow a few moments to ask the attendees to answer this poll, and yet again, we are very curious to the answers.
So especially when you already have a license, this might be interesting. But if you don't, then it might be interesting to know what you can invest in. Yeah,
exactly. And I think it's useful in both cases. So whether you're using a third-party solution right now or no solution at all, it's interesting.
Yeah. I think we've given everybody the time, so let's look at the results. Okay. So it looks like a little more than half of you don't have a license currently, but a little less than half already have a license but are not using it. So that's very interesting. And then I think let's go ahead to talk about the actual features. So the features, I want to highlight at a very high level first, what makes attack simulation training unique as a platform. So firstly, the payloads, which are the actual phishing emails that you can use, are out of box. So there are lots of out-of-box phishing emails that you can use. So you don't have to create them yourself. But if you want, you can. So it both has out-of-box payloads, and there's a broad possibility to create custom payloads yourselves. The delivery platform is email, but I will say there are developments on that. Because I think that the Teams as delivery platform is in private preview right now. One key feature that's very useful in attack simulation training is the predicted compromise rate, because Microsoft has anonymized statistics about the success rate of all global payloads. They can tell you something about the chance of success that a certain payload has. And just as with the payloads, the training material, so those will be videos and interactive videos, are also out of box. So the platform comes with out of box training material, but you can also include your own custom training material. And I think that the reporting is very good. So there is very high over and very detailed reporting available, reporting over overall with like the performance of all the phishing simulations you did and the differences between those. So it's very useful for administrators to see how well their users are performing.
You can even compare those with previous launched attack simulation trainings, right? So you can get an overview of the let's say average score of your organization, which is very interesting.
Yeah, and I think that an important feature as well is that it all stays within your M365 tenant. So you don't have to, I will highlight it later again, but you don't have to open up your organization to a third-party platform by changing your DNS records and or whitelisting anything in your email servers or Exchange Online. So automation is also a very important one. You can automate simulations, configure them beforehand to make it possible to create less administrative overhead. And reminders and positive reinforcement are included. So you can there is automated reminders for people who need to follow training, and you can also use positive reinforcement if somebody did report a phishing email and deleted it.
And how can you trigger this positive reinforcement? Because how is somebody notified about this positive reinforcement?
So either right after they reported the email, they can get a positive reinforcement email, and we'll show that later, I think, how it looks like. Or you can do it after the entire simulation is done.
So this is you can do this by only hit the report button for this particular email.
Yeah. So, of course, important features are as well what phishing techniques are available in this simulation. And I think that drive-by URLs and credential harvesting is more traditional. So that would also include landing pages of phishing websites. But I think that the more advanced ones, so the fake malware attachments or links in attachments or link to malware, and even something very Microsoft specific, the OAuth consent grant is also a phishing technique that can be used. So that means that you would grant an app, for example, access to your email or your calendar or your contacts. But if you just want to use the platform to send out educated emails about how to recognize phishing emails, you can use the how to guide phishing technique that basically sends out training material for people to view.
And while using a trial license, the only option over here is the credential harvest one, which is interesting, but you can still use it.
And I just wanted to go over the different attack techniques. So here you can see the amount of simulation sent. Though these are again anonymized statistics from the Digital Defense Report from Microsoft. So looking at 6.7 million simulations, you can see that credential harvesting is still very successful. But if you look at the difference in percentage, you can see that drive-by URLs are very successful, and attempts. If you look at the attempts made, people are susceptible to drive-by URLs. So those statistics are very important as well to keep in mind when doing simulation.
Yeah, and around drive-by URLs, I think this is the technique where the end user becomes compromised quite easily as well, right?
Yeah,
because you only need to click a URL and you are being marked as compromised within attack simulation training.
Yeah.
And basically being compromised means you failed the attack simulation training.
Yeah. And credential harvest, of course, is an attack technique where you have to fill in your credentials at a phishing site. Yes. So the end user experience, Tim.
Yeah, let's talk about end user experience, because the solution on its own, it's really interesting, but I think it's very good to know how it will look like for your end user. So just want to highlight a few images on the end user experience. We created 2 attack simulation trainings to show you 2 techniques at the same time. On the left side of the screen, you can see the credential harvest technique, and on the right side of the screen, you can see the OAuth consent grant. And at this point, they look quite similar.
It starts with an email.
It starts with an email. So the end user receives an email to lure the end user to click on a particular component within this email, but it starts all with an incoming email. And based on the payload you're using, it's basically dependent on the payload you're using, how the title of the email looks like, the sender name of the email looks like, etc. So when receiving this email, the next step within the attack simulation training would be the end user to lure the end user to open the email itself. And at this stage, it differs a little bit, because on the left side of the screen, you can see the credential harvest one, which looks quite okay from a branding point of view. So the end user might think this is a legit email from Microsoft, for example, or Microsoft Teams. On the right side of the screen, we're using a payload which focuses on OAuth consent grant, and it basically asks the same, or tries to lure the end user for the same purpose. Just click the link within the email. But the next stage differs a little bit, because on the left side of the screen, it's about credential harvest, which means the end user is asked to provide credentials over here. And it's good to mention that nothing like credentials is stored at this stage, because everything is flushed straight away. So Microsoft is not storing actual credentials at this stage, or let's say, page, because the end user might enter real credentials over here, since they are thinking it's a legit email and they are just asked for credentials, and there's a good chance they will provide even credentials, but they are flushed immediately. On the right side of the slide, you can see the OAuth consent grant page. And at this stage, the end user is asked to provide certain permissions for this application called Microsoft Outlook, which looks quite realistic. And for this, it's only required for the end user to click on accept. And at the moment they provided credentials or clicked on the accept button, the end user is, let's say, phished or compromised. And at this point, the next stage of the attack simulation training will take place. So after being compromised, the end user receives a phishing message, which means the end user is notified about the fact they are part of an attack simulation training, which was carried out by the internal IT team, and they failed for this training. And for the phishing message, it's the same as the payloads. There are a few out-of-the-box phishing messages, but you are able to provide a custom phishing message yourself to inform the employee he or she is phished and what's next. And what's next is interesting as well, because at the same time, the end user is informed about so-called indicators. And those indicators, they differ compared to indicators which are available within, for example, Defender for Endpoint or Defender for Cloud Apps. Within attack simulation training, indicators mean certain components of the actual email which should create some recognition for the end user why it was a phishing email. So, for example, an indicator is around URL hyperlinking, and there are some tool tips over here for the end user how to recognize a phishing email for, let's say, next attack simulation training or even a next incoming phishing email. And on the left side of the screen, it's about URL hyperlinking. On the right side, it's about generic reading, so how you can see whether it's something not specific pointed to you as an individual.
Yeah, and then of course the next step, when you know you've been part of a training or part of a simulation, I mean, and you failed, then of course you go ahead and need to do some training.
Yeah, which is optional, to be honest.
Yeah,
we do recommend to assign training.
Yeah, so you'll get an email to go to the training, or you can schedule it. And if you don't do it within a certain pre-configured time, you'll get reminders as well, reminding emails to do the training. So after you go ahead and click on go to training, here are two examples of training materials. So at the left side, you will see basically a video that users get to watch about phishing, and at the right side there is a more interactive video that they can view.
Yeah, sure. So on the left side of the screen, it's a non-interactive one, and on the right side, it's an interactive one. And Nick will talk about this at the next slide.
Yeah, exactly. So here you can see that on the left side, it just explains what were the identifying things about the phishing email that you could look at to see if it was a phishing email or not. And at the right side, it will ask questions where you need to make decisions, like click on the link or ignore and don't click. And then after that, so at the left side, you can see that after the video and the information, there's a quiz that you have to fill in, and of course you need to make the quiz.
You need to pass it.
You need to pass it. Sorry. And then on the right side, there's still more interactive view about indicators of phishing. And then, of course, if you did report the phishing email and you succeeded in the phishing simulation, you'll get a positive reinforcement email like this. So thank you for reporting a phish. And just as I said before, you can get this either directly after you've reported or when the entire simulation is finished. You can configure that beforehand. So another poll. are you using automation in your phishing simulation campaigns? A lot of you already deployed phishing simulation or security awareness training solutions. So we are wondering if you're already using automation before we go ahead and talk about that a little. All right, I think we've given everyone enough time, so let's see the results. Interesting. So most of you aren't using automation, which means you're doing it manually. And the next part might be very interesting.
Yeah, there are some good wins over here, I guess.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about the automation capabilities of the attack simulation training for Microsoft. So basically, there are two kinds of simulation or automations available within attack simulation training. And those would be simulation automations and payload automations. So the first one are simulation automations, and those are what you would expect. So you can pre-configure and plan everything beforehand. So you select a time period where simulation takes place. You can make sure it is, for example, a yearly phishing simulation and you can also, of course, define groups or users that are part of this simulation. You can set a time between in a certain period where these users will receive a phishing email. They don't have to receive it all at once. And it can even take into account the local time of the users if you're working in an international environment. So they won't receive a phishing email at night, but during their working hours.
And this gives you the option to randomize certain components as well, right?
Yeah. You can even say that not all users will receive the same phishing email, but they will receive different ones, and you can select which ones will be part of this campaign. So yeah, this basically enables you to create a baseline of simulations in your environment that will take place that you don't have to launch manually yourself. The second one is maybe the least known automation. It's payload automations, and it was previously called payload harvesting. And this is a very interesting one. If you're interested in creating custom payloads, so custom phishing emails, because this is one of the main advantages that this entire platform is included in the same license as the phishing protection of Defender for Office 365 Plan 2. And that is because if users report an actual phishing email, or the Defender for Office 365 marks an email as phishing and blocks it, you can basically set out a net to catch those emails, so you can convert them to templates to use in your simulation. So in that way, you can simulate real-world examples of phishing emails and include them in your manual simulations, or you can include them in your planned automated simulations. So users will receive emails that resemble actual phishing emails. Of course, they will every link and email address will be changed, so it will be converted just to a template, and nothing dangerous remains.
So this easily expands the out-of-the-box payloads, I guess.
Yes, exactly. And you can configure, when a certain phishing email will be catched by the payload automation capability. So if one user in your organization gets a phishing email, it won't be catched. But if it's, for example, if more than 5 users get that phishing email, you can catch it.
Okay, let's have a discussion around reporting, because the end user experience and all the features within attack simulation training are interesting, but in the end, you want to know how your colleagues or how your entire organization is performing on this attack simulation training campaign. And there is quite some reporting available. And I have a slide with 2 images of the attack simulation training portal, and which statistics are available in this portal. And I think the most important one is on the left side of the screen, so you can see immediately how many users are compromised, so who clicked the link or provided an OAuth consent grant for a certain application, but also the number of users who are using the report button and reported this attack simulation training email as a potential phishing email, which gives you a good overview in a blink of an eye how the organization is performing in general. And there are some numbers around the amount of time, how long it took before end users clicked on the link for the first time, for example, which gives you some insights on how people behave on this attack simulation training email. In the right image, on the right side of the slide, you can see particular components of the attack simulation training email. So once you send out an attack simulation training email, you can see how many people click the link within this attack simulation training email, but even the number of users who supplied credentials. And the components of this all user activity reporting part might differ based on the attack simulation training technique. For example, when we are talking about OAuth consent grant, supplied credentials isn't involved in this attack simulation training campaign. So supplied credentials could be replaced by something like provided OAuth consent grant. But you can see how many users read the message, deleted the message. The only thing you need to be aware of, people who are archiving emails, so not deleting the email, but archiving the email, those users are not being involved in this reporting, because reporting is only focused on the components which are being displayed on the screen right now. Besides the attack simulation training campaign specific details, there is something available for reporting on each individual within your company. So you are able to see a view where you can verify the users who are compromised within this attack simulation training campaign, but also the number of users who reported the email as a potential phishing email. But in the end, if somebody clicked the link, you want to know if the assigned training is, if they follow the training, for example. So there are quite some details on user level to see in this reporting as well. Because in the end, when somebody is compromised, you want somebody to have a training assigned, but to finish this training as well, to upskill their knowledge. Last but not least, there's also some reporting available tenant-wide, which means it's not focused on the individual, it's not focused on the campaign itself you are running at the moment, but it's an option to compare tenant-wide the previous attack simulation trainings, which means there's an option to show repeating offenders, which means people who failed the attack simulation training campaign for more than once. But also users who didn't complete the training, and the number of users who didn't experience an attack simulation training. This is an interesting one because the number of users who didn't experience an attack simulation training campaign yet, it includes also guest users, which might confuse the actual data in there.
All right, so let's do a little comparison to similar products. Just a few things that I wanted to highlight. So I mentioned this before, but you don't need to whitelist external phishing servers. Funnily enough, or interestingly enough, if you use Defender for Office 365 Advanced Phishing Protection, every email will be opened and every link will be opened in a sandbox environment before an email is delivered to an Exchange Online email inbox. And if you work with third-party phishing servers or phishing services, you often run into the problem that you're going to see that the statistics of that platform aren't accurate because it counts the opening of the email and the opening of the links in a sandbox environment by Microsoft as an actual action of the users. You don't have that problem when you use the attack simulation training platform from Microsoft, of course, because that data is accurate. And again, the data stays within your tenants, so you don't have to open up your environment to an external party and to make sure that phishing emails are delivered. All the data stays within the tenant boundaries. You have access to global anonymized performance metrics that are integrated with the solution, and that's something that, definitely not all of the other solutions have. And it's all built into the same security portal, security.microsoft.com, where all the security solutions of Microsoft reside now. So you have one pane of glass for every security solution, and it's not just a new place where you need to log in. You can do some pretty interesting things that might be very hard to do with other platforms. Things like spoofing existing Microsoft 365 users, for example, to create a realistic compromised account or insider threat simulation. And it offers an out-of-the-box experience. You have a lot of out-of-box payloads and training material, but you can also make it tailor-made to your organization, the simulations and the training material. So let's go ahead to the tips and tricks then.
Yeah, I think we discussed quite some topics already. So we would like to provide some tips and tricks while using attack simulation training. And one of the tips and tricks is please be aware while using a third-party solution for mobile threat defense, for example. This might cause some confusion because when using, for example, MTD solutions on mobile devices and not using a Defender for Endpoint from Microsoft on mobile devices, this third-party MTD solution might mark an incoming email as a potential phishing email, or it blocks this phishing link within this phishing email, which might confuse the statistics within the attack simulation training tool. So please be aware of this.
Yeah, Microsoft knows it's a phishing email,
exactly.
A phishing simulation email, but your other threat defense solutions don't know that.
They don't know that, and they might even do a good job because they are preventing the end user for reaching out to this particular URL. But it can, confuse the attack simulation training statistics. Yeah. Another one is around Teams delivery platform. As Nick mentioned, the primary delivery platform is email at the moment within attack simulation training, which means all the attack simulation training campaigns are carried out by sending an email to the end user, which means everything is around emailing. Teams as a delivery platform is in private preview right now, and we hope this becomes available within the near future, so you can carry out even attack simulation training campaigns while using Teams instead of email, which is quite interesting and relevant at the moment. The next thing is around calendar availability. It's useful to benchmark all your employees, all individuals. So when having a company-wide meeting, so every member of your organization is included in this company-wide meeting, and at the same time launching an attack simulation training might confuse the reporting as well, because everybody is spreading word of this running attack simulation training when somebody finds out this is an attack simulation training, which is a good thing on its own, because employees warning each other for a real phishing email is not a bad thing on its own. But on the other hand, you want to benchmark each individual. So please be aware of calendar availability as well. I hope I don't have to explain this one, but don't exclude your C and D level colleagues from an attack simulation training. And I'm mentioning this because we see this happening quite often, but you want to test those high value targets as well within your organization. So please include them instead of excluding those colleagues in an attack simulation training campaign.
Yeah, you could even create specifically, automated simulations for that C and D level employees or colleagues that might be more of a spear phishing email, right?
Exactly.
So,
yeah, that's an interesting one as well. Last tip we want to provide is around consider attaching a Microsoft form occasionally to this attack simulation training. So you can assign trainings to this attack simulation training campaign as well, but you can also assign a Microsoft form as a kind of a questionnaire to this attack simulation training.
To get feedback from you.
Exactly. How did people experience this attack simulation training? Do they have some tips and tricks around launching the next attack simulation training, for example?
All right, so now we're at the question stage, and I don't think I see any questions in the chat. So if you have any questions afterwards that you want us to answer, please reach out, because we're glad to talk about this. Don't worry, this is not a phishing test. This is not a quishing test. You can book a one-on-one with our security experts if you scan this code to get more examples of how this tool can be used than the ones that we showed, or if you want to know how difficult it is to implement, things like that. So please, if you scan the QR link, the QR code, then you can book a meeting with our security experts. And then the last thing is to thank everyone for attending this webinar. I hope you learned something, and we could share this hidden gem with you, especially those that already have a license and are already paying for this solution and aren't using it. I hope this gives you insight into what you have available to you. And for those that don't have access to this feature from the security stack of Microsoft yet, I hope we could show you the value of this. And please remember that it's also included into a license where other things are included as well. So the advanced phishing protection and advanced ransomware protection that are part of Defender for Office 365 Plan 2 are included into the license as well. And you have this phishing simulation training platform included there.
Yeah, so thank you for joining. I want to say thank you to our host from today, Margot behind the screens, and we hope to see you at the next webinar. Thank you for joining.